Hello everyone, and I hope everybody is doing perfectly fine. So what today we'll be doing is discussing a very important topic from general pathology, that is immunity. And immunity I'll try to cover in 5-6 lectures. And today what we'll be discussing is basics of immunity. What are the different types and what is the basic thing or the stuff you should know when we start reading this chapter. Before delving into disease proper, so today I'll be discussing about innate immunity. Basically, there are two types, innate and adaptive. So today I'll start with the easy topic, that is innate immunity. So immunity is what? When this terminology comes to your mind, तो हमें सबसे पहले क्या ख्याल आता है कि oh, my immunity is good, so I am safe from this kind of disease. So during this COVID, everybody was in talking terms with this. They were well versed with the term immunity कि मेरी immunity strong है तो COVID नहीं हो सकता. और this actually applies to many different pathogens and different variety of diseases which can affect us. So it's a general conception that if our immunity is strong, we are protected from different kinds of infections and from development of any sort of cancer. So similarly, जब अगर हम immune deficient हो जाते हैं, so what happens? Suppose my immunity is less, so I'll be like an easy prey to infection or development of any sort of cancer. So immune system, it is a double-edged sword, you can say. So when we are considering with immune deficiency, similarly what you notice is our immune system, if it is working more, so what it can do is it can harm your own tissues. So that will lead to development of autoimmune diseases or different kinds of allergies in patient. So what is normal immune response? So basically this is your how strong is my body to fight against any sort of infections or cancer. So suppose host reaction against any cancer, so that is termed as your tumor immunity. Tissue transplants, that is even self-antigen, that is your autoimmunity. So when we read about normal immune response, we have to understand what is mechanism of immunity. ठीक है, अगर वो सेल्फ एंटीजन के अगेंस्ट था, सो दैट इज टर्म्ड एज योर ऑटो इम्यूनिटी. और पेशेंट जो रीनल ट्रांसप्लांट या कोई भी ट्रांसप्लांट के लिए थे, उनमें भी हम वी सी व्हाट हाउ देयर इम्यूनिटी इज स्ट्रॉन्ग. सो व्हेन वी डिस्क्राइब आउट मैकेनिज्म ऑफ इम्यूनिटी, बेसिक जो होती हैं दो, दैट इज योर इनेट इम्यूनिटी एंड योर एडेप्टिव इम्यूनिटी. फाइन. So innate immunity क्या होती है? This is your natural or native immunity, and these are basically intrinsically designed immunity. कि वो that will react very immediately in response to any kind of antigen which is affecting our body. So intrinsic mechanism होता है which is destined to react immediately. So you can consider it as first line of defense. And what it comprises of? It comprises of your cells and molecules that will recognize the product of microbes and your dead cells. Fine. So this is basically a rapid protective host response. Then coming to your adaptive, क्या होती है? Adaptive immunity just opposite of your innate. This is acquired during your lifetime. This is very specific. And when it comes to the strength of immunity, adaptive immunity is by far more stronger than your innate immunity. More powerful in competing or in combating any kind of infections. So it has mechanisms that are stimulated by or they are adaptive to your exposure to microbes or any foreign substance. So these are developed in response to those microbes or foreign substance. So what is innate immunity? जैसे हमने बताया अभी कि basic first line defense है, native immunity है, they are always present, intrinsically designed hai, they are ready to provide immediate defense against your microbes, or they will also help in eliminating the damaged cells. So now we'll see what are the cellular components of your innate immunity. First is your epithelium. कोई भी skin lining हो या कोई भी tissue हो, उसकी एक epithelial lining होती है. Fine. So suppose you are considering this, I have made a rough diagram. This is an intact basement membrane. Overlying you have this epithelial lining, and these red dots I have made as microbes. So what happens? This epithelium is acting as a barrier to entry of these microbes to underlying structures. So epithelium is acting as your mechanical barrier. It also has the capacity to produce antimicrobial substance, which is also known as defensins and lymphocytes. So these are defensins and lymphocytes. These are produced. These are antimicrobial substances which are produced from this epithelial surface. First is एक तो epithelial mechanical barrier बनता है against these microbes, and second is that it produces antimicrobial substances. Suppose if this is breached, if this epithelium is broken down, and then what happens? Comes into play is your phagocytes, which are your monocytes and neutrophils. These are cells which circulate in your blood. So what happens? These are recruited rapidly when there is any kind of antigen exposure to the individual. So this rough diagram, neutrophil or monocytes, आप देख रहे हो, these are blood cells which will immediately act at the site of infection. Then suppose this monocyte, when it resides in tissue, it is also known as your macrophages. So solid organ के कुछ कुछ नाम है, जैसे liver में अगर macrophage है, that is known as your Kupffer cells. Brain, these cells are known as your microglial cells. Lungs, it is also known as your alveolar macrophage. Then third type, apart from your epithelium, then next was your phagocytes like monocytes and neutrophils. Third is your dendritic cells. These are the dendritic cells with the process. They detect the danger and they initiate the immune response immediately. So these are basically specialized cells hoti hai. Where these are present, you get to see these in epithelial or lymphoid organs and most of the tissue. These are your antigen presenting cells. What they do, they capture the protein antigen and they display their peptides for recognition by T cells. They also secrete cytokines. So in a way, they present antigen presenting cells हैं जो T helper cells के पास, they will present that yeah, you have to eat away these cells because, or you have to create an immunity against these antigen. So these are antigen presenting cells to our phagocytic system. Other cells जो होते हैं, they are innate lymphoid cells. What they do, they are tissue resident lymphocytes. They lack जो normal T cell का function, they lack the T cell antigen response. They cannot respond to antigen. So कैसे activate होगा ये? They will be activated by cytokines and other mediators which will be produced at the site of tissue damage. They are grouped as your 1, 2, 3, and these NK cells, example है, NK cells are a type of your innate lymphoid cells. They will provide early protection against many virus and intracellular bacteria. और भी cells होते हैं like your mast cells, endothelial cells, mast cells and endothelial cells. Then there are certain plasma protein which also act as these barriers or the cellular components of your innate system. So ये complement system है. Then your mannose binding lectin and C-reactive protein. So अब जैसे cells, तो अब now we are well versed with the cellular components of our innate system. मतलब हमारे innate system के वो soldiers कौन कौन से हैं? तो अभी we just read about the soldiers of our innate system. But अब इन soldiers को how they will identify that they have to act against these pathogens or their products. So उसके लिए जो pathogen को detect कर सकते, they are pathogen associated molecular patterns. And when the cells are injured or they become necrosed by the effect of bacteria, they release damage associated molecular pattern. So इसमें आता है PAMP and DAMP. So this PAMPs and DAMPs जो होती हैं pattern associated molecular pattern of microbial structure and damage associated molecular pattern of your released from the injured or the necrotic cells, they will be identified by cellular receptors जिसको कहते हैं हम pattern recognition receptor. तो जो हमारे सोल्जर्स हैं सेलुलर कंपोनेंट ऑफ इनेट सिस्टम है, एक तरफ सोल्जर्स हैं सेलुलर कंपोनेंट के, एक तरफ इनेट इम्यूनिटी के, और एक तरफ है हमारे ये डैम्प और पैम्प. और डैम्प पैम्प जो रिलीज हो रहा है माइक्रोबियल प्रोडक्ट से, उनको प्रेजेंट करता है ये पैटर्न रिकॉग्निशन रिसेप्टर. वो इनके साथ कंबाइन होके दे विल ब्रिंग दीज टू आवर रिसेप्टर सेलुलर कंपोनेंट्स. So this is the diagram. This is there in Robbins. I have taken from there. So see, this is representing a plasma membrane. ठीक है, bilayer plasma membrane है. This is your plasma membrane and this is your plasma membrane below. So this is extracellular हो गया ये area. यहाँ पे है ये endosomal और यहाँ है ये cytosolic. So जो हमारे toll-like receptors होते हैं TLR. So receptors जो होते हैं इनके, they are basically of two type, toll-like receptor and nod-like receptor. TLR and nod-like receptor. So TLR, more than 10 TLRs होते हैं जो कि अलग अलग वायरस के लिए कंपोनेंट होते हैं. So what happens, see, जो ये बैक्टीरियल प्रोडक्ट्स है, ठीक है, या माइक्रोबियल पॉलीसेकेराइड्स है, लेप्टिन इज ऑल्सो अदर रिसेप्टर. मेन इज TLR एंड नॉट लाइक रिसेप्टर, और भी है यहाँ पे रिग लाइक रिसेप्टर, लेप्टिन, दीज फोर आर देयर. सो जो TLR रिसेप्टर है, इट इज एक्स्ट्रा सेलुलर in plasma membrane and it is endosomal, and this not like receptor, these are cytosolic receptor. Fine. So जो bacterial products होते हैं वो TLR के साथ combine होता है, और TLR जो receptors है that is also for your nucleic acids of your ingested microbes. Fine. And then you have not like receptor, they what they will do, they will combine with the products of your damaged cells, that is bacterial peptidoglycan. And there are rig like receptor, that is for your viral RNA. तो different components of virus को eat away करने के लिए पहले उसको receptor से combine होना होता है. So these are our receptor, TLR, toll like receptor and node like receptor, and others are leptin and rig like receptor. So जो TLRs होते हैं, they what they do, they will activate two sets of transcription factor. एक होता है NF-k beta, so that will stimulate the synthesis of your cytokines and secretion of your cytokines and expression of adhesion molecule. And what they will do, they will help in recruitment and activation of your leukocytes. And second pathway, what they will to second set of transcription receptor which they will activate is your production of antiviral cytokines and type 1 interferon. So जब ये TLR का loss of function mutation हो जाता है affecting this TLR, so they will cause your serious immunodeficiency syndrome. Similarly, not like receptors जो होती हैं, they are cytosolic receptor, as I showed you in the diagram. What they will do, they will recognize various substances which are released from your necrotic damaged cells like uric acid and ATP. So loss of intracellular potassium ions in some microbial products. So they will be recognized by these not like receptor. So not like receptor क्या करते हैं? They act through inflammasome pathway. So that we have read in cell injury chapter. So the NLRs, what they will do is signal via cytosolic multiprotein complex, which is also known as your inflammasome. Inflammasome will activate your caspase 1, which will cleave the precursor form of interleukin 1. Now this interleukin 1 becomes active. फिर ये क्या करेगा? It becomes a mediator of inflammation. It will recruit leukocyte and it will induce fever in patients. So अगर gain of function mutation हो रही है not like receptor में, तो क्या होगा? और fever आएगा. So that lands up in your auto-inflammatory syndrome or loss of inflammasome. So that will also lead to your gain of function mutation in NLR and loss of function mutation in your regulators of inflammasome that will end up in auto-inflammatory syndromes in the patients. दूसरे receptors होते हैं C type lectin receptor जो microbial products के लिए होते हैं. This I showed you in the diagram. Leptin, so they are present on a plasma membrane of macrophages and dendritic cells. They will detect fungal glycans and elicit inflammatory reactions in response to fungus. Then there are rig-like receptor, that is retinoic acid inducible gene 1. These are seen in cytosol. This also we had seen in exam picture. So that again act against your viral RNA. So this will stimulate the production of your antiviral cytokines and they activate a STING pathway. What is STING? It is stimulator of your interferon gene. So which will lead to the production of antiviral cytokine, that is interferon alpha. So excessive activation अगर हो जाती है STING pathway की, so that will lead to your systemic inflammatory disorders, that is interferonopathies. So now we are well versed with the cellular components, that is our soldiers of the innate system, innate immunity. Then receptors, now we are okay with receptors. Then receptors किससे combine करके present करते हैं हमारे cellular components को. Now what happens? Reaction, innate immunity दिखेगी कैसे? So that is in, suppose कहीं हमें चोट लगती है, what happens? That area is inflamed, it becomes red. So means immunity is acting over there. So inflammation, first response होता है innate immunity का inflammation, क्योंकि जो सारे components release हो रहे हैं वो है cytokines, products of your complement activation. These are produced during innate immune reactions. They trigger vascular and cellular components of inflammation. So what they will do, they will recruit this recruited leukocyte, they will destroy the microbes, ingest and eliminate the damaged cells. So ये inflammation के through act होता है. Then they also have response, they'll show in action, that is your antiviral defense, that is type 1 interferon. What they will do is act on your infected cells and they will activate the enzyme that will degrade the viral nucleic acid and they will inhibit, जब nucleic acid को inhibit कर रहा है तो viral replication भी बंद हो जाती है, correct? So these are the various response, how will you observe that yes, innate immunity is active. So this was all about your innate immunity. Next class, what I'll be discussing is adaptive immunity and the difference in between innate and adaptive. Adaptive is basically two type. So that in detail we'll be discussing, that is humoral and cellular, cell mediated and humoral immunity, that is adaptive. So main जो immunity होती है ना, stronger immunity होती है, वो adaptive होती है. But you should know about innate immunity in detail as well. So next class we'll discuss adaptive immunity. So thank you so much for your patient hearing. Kindly like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.